introduce myself. My name is Rhonda, and I would like to welcome and thank everybody for joining our webinar today. Of course, thank you to our sponsors for making our webinar series possible: Government of Canada, Emergency Community Support Fund, and Community Foundation of Nova Scotia. Life with Scleroderma Personal Stories is today's topic. And we're going to hear from Dina-Marie, Catherine, Laura, Susan, and Jacob. Each guest will share their story, which is sure to be fascinating. And once we hear from all of our speakers, we will open up for questions from our listeners. So we look forward to hearing your questions. The questions can be posted on the Q&A icon. And we will answer them at the end of the webinar. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I will turn it over to Dina-Marie now to start us off today.
Okay. Hello, my name is Dina-Marie. I am currently 26, living in Ottawa, Ontario, originally from Windsor, Ontario. My journey began in 2012 with inflammation, severe joint pain, and Raynaud's being the first indications of disease progression. Fast forward 2 years, I noticed I could no longer make a fist, a thumbs up, or any hand gesture for that matter, where standing for long periods caused me unbearable pain. Ulcers formed on my fingers and bending became a problem. I was sent to a rheumatologist and was officially diagnosed with diffuse scleroderma on June 5th, 2014. I was 18 at the time. It was difficult at first. I was a happy-go-lucky, creative young girl, a competitive figure skater, a goal setter, a dreamer. Then I became confused, angry, stressed, worried, and hopeless overnight. But overall, I was scared. It seemed like every day something new would be affected. I went from being my so-called definition of normal to a life scheduled around appointments, prescriptions, and constant testing. I am still trying to figure out how to manage my disease, but truthfully, I'm a terrible patient. No matter what I do, I cannot remember to take my prescribed medication and oftentimes don't take any. Alarms, reminders, organizers, apps. I have tried numerous techniques to keep on top of a schedule, but it does not work for me. I have also tried naturopathy, veganism, acupuncture, and cannabis to help manage my disease and the pain associated with it. However, I did not notice any results with inflammation or pain, as it's important to note what works for one individual may not work for everyone, as this disease is very trial and error based. Now, what actually does help me is receiving a monthly infusion of a drug called Ilocrost. Ilocrost is a very strong vasodilator and helps manage my Raynaud's and prevent ulcers. It is not a cure for my ulcers, as I still receive many and currently have like 4 I'm trying to heal. However, it does help speed the healing process. Another aspect that really helps me manage my disease is therapy. No one likes to talk about mental illness, but unfortunately, when being diagnosed with an incurable progressive disease, anxiety and depression are an inevitable part of the package. For instance, I worry about the disease and its progression, potential fibrosis and crippling, my upcoming appointments, and how everyone views me, because sometimes I believe it is all they see, as if I have scleroderma is stamped on my forehead. Then there is the feeling of having a young, goal-driven mind and a determined heart trapped in a malfunctioning body. And let's not forget the grieving of our past selves. Now, I do not speak to a therapist weekly. I am aware when my anxiety and depression get to a point where I need to take action and ask for help. There is something about speaking to a professional to help open your eyes and allow you to understand it is okay for you to feel like this, and it is okay to feel sorry for yourself. I personally believe taking care of your mental health is just as important, if not more, than your physical health. The mind can be a scary place, and it is essential to open up the conversation about mental illness associated with scleroderma. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength, and it took me a while to realize that. Don't get me wrong, I am not always this positive about scleroderma, because let's be honest, having scleroderma can be a real bummer. You can catch me having a panic attack at 3 in the morning because I'm so overwhelmed and pushed to my breaking point that I need a moment to myself, a reminder almost that I am human. Every day I miss myself and grieve the person I once was, but I will never be 100% my old self. That old self is now gone. Scleroderma has completely changed my life. I may not be able to accomplish the many goals I once dreamed of, but scleroderma has allowed me to put things in perspective and set smaller, more attainable goals that can be fulfilled in the near future. It has also taught me to be resilient, proactive, and confident to an extent. Truth be told, without scleroderma, I would not be with my amazing and supportive partner. I would not be living in Ottawa or have the job that I currently have. I would not have my 2 cats or my dark, morbid sense of humor. I would not have met all the amazing warriors like myself or have been granted amazing opportunities to advocate across Canada. And I would be oblivious to the extensive world of autoimmune diseases. It may be difficult to accept and be aware of at times, but my life is pretty great. Scleroderma has made me who I am today. It may have taken away my past self, but I would not wish to change my diagnosis and be the person I once was. I would like to conclude with this. There are 3 things certain in life: death, taxes, and setbacks. Scleroderma is just one of my many setbacks, and for years I was in denial, not fully accepting the disease and its totality. And truthfully, I do not believe I will ever fully accept my diagnosis because there is a part of me which wishes to be disease-free. With all that being said, it is important to remember you didn't cause scleroderma. You can't cure it, avoid it, outsmart it, nor control it. What you can do is manage it and live with your new normal, because staying true to yourself is the real battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina-Marie. Now let's move on to our next speaker, Catherine.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Fortuné. I live in Ottawa. I was diagnosed with scleroderma in 2003 with systemic sclerosis. My symptoms were swollen hands, feet, and also purple hands. I would go to work and my coworker would say to me, I want someone with normal hands coming to work with me. I don't want purple hands. A new word was added to my vocabulary on that day when I was diagnosed. It took about 2 years to be diagnosed because I had joint pains and swellings and things like that. We thought it would have been rheumatoid arthritis. My GP sent me to a specialist, well, a rheumatologist, and it was amazing. This individual diagnosed me right away. As soon as she saw me and did the skin score and things like that, I was diagnosed right away. I have to say I was fortunate because she was part of a group of researchers, rheumatologists across the country trying to just set up to study this disease. Nothing more happened. Everything seemed to plateau out until about 2009, when I couldn't walk properly. My feet were so swollen, I couldn't walk. My hands were swollen. I couldn't hold anything. I felt really helpless and had to depend on people to do just about everything for me. I told the rheumatologist at the time that this is what was happening to me, and he, by that time, I had moved to Ottawa, and he called me in right away, looked at me and says, you cannot work anymore. You have to be home. He immediately put me on prednisone and talked about, and I was on a very high dosage of prednisone. I think I was taking about 10 milligrams per day. He talked to me about getting on to another medication called methotrexate, which I didn't know much about it and didn't want to get on it. Ultimately, I did get on to methotrexate and balance. I'm balancing off, weaning myself off prednisone right now and taking methotrexate. So as of now, I'm dealing with 2 milligrams of prednisone per day and 10 milligrams of methotrexate. And I'm going to be weaning myself off both of them, but at a slower rate. So the biggest challenges I have in surviving scleroderma right now is the winter months. It's just way too cold for me. I'm cold all the time. I have to keep heat on and warm sweaters in the house. Another challenge is eating after 6. If I eat after 6, I have to sit up for quite a number of hours. I can't go to bed until about 11 or so. I learned that with scleroderma, I learned that I must advocate for myself. Some medical professionals aren't really familiar with treating scleroderma patients. So in other words, I have to help them understand how to treat scleroderma patients and what we go through. I keep track of all my medical tests and documents, and when I go for visits to the doctors, I ask questions. If I don't understand something, I ask questions because I need to know what is happening with my body. So scleroderma is a life-changing illness, and it's not only the patient's lives, it changes their family and friends around them, their immediate supporters. Their lives are also changed. I have to state one thing: we must not give up on research. I believe that because of research, I'm here today because of all the different medications that has helped me. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, we'll hear from Laura.
Hi, my name's Laura Simmons, and I am with you from Halifax. Thank you very much, Rhonda. I think I speak more about the elements that have resolved or that I found adaptations for during my journey rather than the medicines I've tried. Because really, for the most part, I found most of the treatments to be worse than the disease. But I will mention a couple of prescriptions that worked for me and a diet. Of course, your doctor and you have to figure out what works best for you. In 2010, in March, my daughter and I both won indoor soccer championships in our respective leagues. But in December of 2010, somebody pushed me up against the boards in indoor soccer and I broke a rib. And I feel like that was the event that my scleroderma needed to become active. My early signs were swollen hands. I couldn't pick things up, couldn't hold on to them, and I locked myself in rooms. So these were some of my remedies. The bottom right is a small TENS machine that I bought and used it every night on both my hands for about 3 weeks. And after that was the first time in about 4 years that I could see the bones in the backs of my hands. And it just really feels good too. So with continued exercises, this is mostly resolved except for finger ulcers. So moving on to the finger ulcers, first I had mixed connective tissue disease, then the Raynaud's started, then I was diagnosed with the scleroderma. It's about 3 years before I had my first finger ulcers, but you can see that they're nasty little things. So to help with these, if I can't dry properly, I use the hair blower. I always use the nitrile gloves for washing dishes and preparing meals. I have cutlery that doesn't hurt my hands. And the bottom right is a hand warmer that is my constant companion. The best thing that happened to me was when my rheumatologist managed to get me a 6-month dose of Viagra. Within 3 days, my finger ulcers had all closed up. But it's really expensive to stay on, so I'm not on it now. Again, early on, I had pain everywhere. My muscles, joints, teeth, no hugs, no handshakes, just don't touch me. And about 3 or 4 times a year, I would come down with chills in the evening, and then the next day I'd wake up with a sky-high fever and too much pain to be able to move. And I'd lie there and say, please God, make me feel better. And then after a few minutes, a few hours, it would turn to, please God, take me now. I'm ready to go. Just take me now. But at the same time, I also marveled at the fact that I didn't sweat. I was always thirsty. I had no tears because the collagen squeezes out your sweat glands. But during these bouts, I would just like sweat buckets. And so I always wondered, where did the collagen go? And why can't it just stay away? Now, if I don't rake or shovel or do too much housework now, I'm okay. If I overdo it, then I know the next day I will be in bed with a fever and a lot of pain. Another thing that's ongoing with me is the small mouth thing. So this again made me wonder, why is my mouth so tight that I can't get a fork full of food in, but at the very same time, I can't close my mouth enough to use a straw? And for about 2 summers, I could not stick my tongue out far enough to lick ice cream cone. And that was just cruel. But the one thing about small mouth is that it helps with the small throat. If you can fit it on the fork and get it through that small mouth and do it really well, then it's a better chance that it's going to go down your throat. And I eventually figured out the temperature thing. For years, I thought I would never eat fresh fruit again because they always got stuck sideways in my esophagus. And then I realized it was because I was eating fruit cold, and cold constricts. So now I warm it up to room temperature before I eat it. And every single thing that I eat, I chase with a warm cup of decaf tea with lactose-free milk or warm water with lemon, everything that I eat. Most of us have the GERD and we understand a lot about it. But my clearest memory many years ago is of waking up in the middle of the night and my esophagus was just stuffed full of food and I couldn't burp. I'm sitting up in bed in a panic, pounding on my chest, trying to make myself burp. And then it occurred to me, I have never heard that anyone died from not being able to burp. So I just went back to sleep. But around that same time, I realized I wasn't burping, but I also wasn't farting or yawning or hiccuping. And that lasted a couple of years. And actually, I was a little sad when it resolved on its own accord. One of my earlier symptoms that has not stabilized, and I haven't had such a good result with, was my gut involvement. My main gut problem started about 8 years after my initial symptoms. But my gastro doctor told me to watch for the signs of small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And after having a few weeks of being really sick in December of 2019, I remembered her words, saw my GP who gave me rifaximin. It was a game changer for my life. Now I follow a low FODMAP diet quite strictly, and I'm having good results. It's not supposed to be a long-term diet, but I've gone from 5 to 10 bowel movements every day down to 1, and I'm just not willing to go off this diet and risk going back up to all those runs to the washroom every day. So for the most part, that has resolved. I do have to watch what I eat and be very careful, but that's pretty much resolved. Fingers crossed, because it's only been about 6 weeks. Another one of my symptoms that's ongoing relates to my breathing and shortness of breath. So I do things like take my laundry only as far as the kitchen and then half an hour later, take it up the other flight of steps. But again, a couple funny stories. I had a contract on the 15th floor of the office building for a while that had an express elevator. And every day I take that elevator, it would suck the breath right out of my lungs. And I would have to get off, lean up against a wall for about 30 seconds before I had enough breath to walk down the hallway. It made me smile every single morning. Did not happen on the way back down, only on the way up. The other thing, around 10:30 in the morning, I start hacking and coughing. I run to the washroom and cough up these pretty little frothy white bubbles. I asked every one of my doctors about this, and they all shrugged their shoulders. And then I was talking to a young lady with lupus at the Toronto Motorcycle Show, and she said right away, "Oh, you're drinking too much milk. Just cut out the milk." Sure enough, the bubbles went away. Relating also to the shortness of breath and the exhaustion, I feel, is the change in temperature. I think for myself, changing from the hot shower into cold air is what used to make me need to lie down right away. So now I get out of the hot shower and I immediately stand in front of a heater blowing hot air on me while I get dried and dressed. I also have a heated jacket and I warm up the car so that my core temperature stays the same temperature as I'm walking from the house into the car. And I feel like that doesn't make me so exhausted from outings. Another thing that I watch very closely is trying to keep my arms close to my body. Lifting anything over my head or folding sheets is very exhausting. So for instance, I lay the sheets on the bed to fold them. But otherwise, it's not so bad. So in summary, things get better, things get worse, some stay the same. Scleroderma not only affects different people differently, but from day to day, it affects each person differently. Sometimes these things resolve themselves and sometimes we adapt, but we always have each other to help us through. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Up next is Susan.
Trying to get myself on. Okay, here I am. So my name is Susan, and here's my story. I was telling them earlier that I've had scleroderma for a lot of years, so I had lots of stuff to figure out and write down. So I hope I'm not going to bore you. I started 2021 feeling optimistic. Leg ulcer was progressing well, best ever since August 9, 2019. I adjusted well to prescription compression socks, 20 to 30. My fingers were feeling great, and a year and a half now on dilator drugs. My GERD issues were manageable. My mobility was improving. I completed COVID-19 coping skills 6 weeks class with 5 others, and I completed support group leader training 13 weeks with 6 others. And there I learned that you have a life outside of scleroderma. So I'm looking forward to Alberta and Saskatchewan combining more of our provincial meetings. Life is good, but what changed? Bang number 4. Last week, January 6th, the PICC line is infected and needs to come out. Last use was early December. The line had been in for nearly 6 months, but last Sunday was done. Bang number 5. Noticed redness and swelling on the right leg where the vein stripping was done in August, but the area had completely healed. Now I have cellulitis, staph infection from what's on my skin. I'm feeling attacked. No appetite, on oral antibiotics, but when are things going to level out again? Actually, today as I was trying to put this information together, I have a new IV site, first try, and first dose is in. So come along for a roller coaster ride. Life with scleroderma. My diagnosis was fairly easy. 1995, I suffered facial redness, deep spots of acne. The dermatologist said rosacea, but unknown to me, blood work on my medical showed crest. A year or 2 later, my twin sister, Helen, received a scleroderma diagnosis. When my fingers started turning blue as I washed raspberries, I too was given a scleroderma diagnosis after an obscure test to do with ANA antibodies. A few years later, my doctor found the original record with a 1995 CREST diagnosis. Calcinosis, Raynaud's, esophagus dysmotility, sclerodactyly, tanglionacea. I have all the above. The first symptom being hand issues, and I also have a systemic sclerosis diagnosis. I remember blood work being done at a specific lab in Calgary, as the well-known Dr. Fitzler was a resident and apparently knew what this disease was all about, but I was never privileged to meet him. Life with scleroderma had started. Helen in Manitoba, me in Alberta, 800 miles apart. In spite of the miles separating us, we found support together, spending winters in a warm climate, but twins, identical and with the same DNA, our disease journey has not been identical. For 10 years, I carefully protected my hands from the cold, watched scleroderma showed up as redness colored bands on my legs, did yearly appointments with the rheumatologist, Calgary, Alberta. Through the years, I became to value the specialist opinion as to making sure every part of my body had benchmarks. As the symptoms progressed, yearly echocardiograms, pulmonary functions, and the rest I'm not sure. Few people knew I had a condition. There was not much to talk about anyhow. What happened? Scleroderma was hiding beneath the surface. Bang number one. A common atrial fibrillation, a common heart disease started, which I like to say doesn't get better, doesn't go away, and continues relentless with more and more frequency and many trips to ER. Some of the comments, oh, you have scleroderma, why do you take all these meds? You want to shock me with the paddles? I need a second opinion. My husband isn't even allowed back here yet. And then finally, a scruffy doctor comes in looking like he just woke up. But this guy was a lung specialist and did know something about AFib and had experience with scleroderma. Did some intern work with my current roomie, and he was a specialist on call. I finally was sent for an angiogram with the intent to have a biopsy done on my heart, which wasn't warranted, but I did come away with a piece of paper describing fibrosis tissue in my heart. Fast forward 2 years. My sister found an ad in the local Mesa, Arizona newspaper for a one-day session in Phoenix. We both went at no charge and heard this electrophysiologist talk about AFib, current remedies, and a hot fix for patients, literally burning a ring around each of the 4 pulmonary veins going to the heart. And I pored over the information and miraculously found a Calgary connection. I became part of a North American study, Cabana, and after 5 years of being on the drug side and nothing giving me relief other than one drug that allowed the AFib but kept the heart rate at 125, that one knocked me flat with zero energy. So finally I pleaded my case with family at the consult meeting with Dr. V and was moved to the pulmonary vein ablation side. I heard over and over, only giving you a 50% chance of success. We still have other options. Kill the AV node and give you a pacemaker. June 15th, 2015, the team of doctors fixed my heart, just like my grandson prayed the night before. Amazing. Bang number 2, finger ulcers. First the R pointer, then the left pointer, and the middle. Hands down, no contest. These are the most painful injuries ever related to scleroderma. The more times your digits are red, blue, and finally white, you increase the risk of a finger ulcer. Nothing like it for pain, not much success in finding a treatment that works. I have a friend that was my sounding board. Look now, it's healing. Isn't it looking better? Well, 1 step forward and 10 back. So I was an oxy patient for 1-2 years. Seemed like a blur. Take as needed. And by 10:30 a.m., I had whispered to my daughter in church, I'm done taking the meds for the day. Now what? So I learned to divide the hours around the clock into 4 blocks, and every 6 hours, I would take 1 or 2 oxycodone. Yeah, right, this is the very addictive stuff. And it was just a year ago that I finally got rid of the last bottle in the cupboard. I had a pact with my husband during that time that he had full access to watching what I was doing and my notes, and once I stopped, I was held to account for the remaining drugs. At the Hamilton, Ontario Scleroderma Conference, I learned about medical cannabis. But how would I get to that product? No doctor in Sylvan Lake, Alberta would consider this a good option. So I went in the back door. I had a connection with Frank, who was not afraid to use what he needed to be pain-free. So I followed his advice and called the Kootenai medicine tree, sent my medical records from my AFib doctor and whatever else I needed, and within the next week I had a Canada Post delivery. Not that difficult. I'm happy to report that now I'm a total legal card-carrying patient and have gone through an Alberta government prescribing clinic. The product is great, but now I only need to use it as a sleep aid. Still comes by Canada Post, and I'm happy with Organigram's product, grown and processed in New Brunswick, Canada. Along the way, I read an article from the physiotherapy publication, and it was a new therapy, specially used for scleroderma hands, shockwave therapy. I didn't continue that for longer than a year, but I did find something else. So here's bang number 3, the leg ulcer. With the last finger ulcer in the beginning of the leg ulcer, I finally took the plunge at the suggestion of another scleroderma patient. I switched to a new roomie. This guy is very progressive and has been working hard to establish a center in Edmonton, Alberta. Amazing though, the number of doctors that do not know how serious this condition can be. It was January 2019, I saw a plastic surgeon in Red Deer, Alberta, who at our first meeting used the A word, amputation. He was adamant scleroderma wounds did not need any debridement, nor would there be any cutting. But he did perform a small biopsy. The ulcer had started as a scratch on my left shin and simply got bigger and bigger, finally shadowing to the other side of the leg, and then the good flesh was getting eaten by the bacteria. It was not known to have had anything growing in it, so I credit my family doctor here in Sylvan Lake to being vigilant and ready to try to do anything to get me the healing help I need. I now see a vascular surgeon in Calgary for advice, and after months of waiting for healing, he suggested the great saphenous vein should be stripped, as ultrasound testing showed it was not performing. So that was done August 2020, and another procedure, ablation of the small saphenous vein, was done December 2020. I admit I've been a slow mover. Compression stockings are the gold standard for getting these ulcers to heal. And slowly and steady, I have mastered using these. Costly per pair, but a sock contraption that is such a game changer to put them on and off. And the support of home care staff, of nurses with their gold standard level of treatment. I did suggest to my doctor that an x-ray could be in order, as it would show if the bone was infected. Results showed on July 2020, the bone was okay, but what was not okay was the hundreds of shards of calcium deposits up and down the entire leg. In the wound, when it was cleaning time, the nurse was able to pick out what sounded and also felt like shards of glass. So bang number 4, IV therapy at U of A Hospital, Edmonton. Early November 2019, I was admitted to the hospital to be one of the roomies' experimental patients for IV treatment with a drug, Carafol, that has shown increased blood flow with many lung transplant patients, and they were also willing to share some of their beds with scleroderma patients. It was something good to try. Although nothing earth-shattering, I still have all my finger digits on both hands, so who really knows? At the last walk we held in Sylvan Lake 2019, I made a point of listing all the patients who had died from this horrible disease and also were represented by family. And here are their names: Fish or Phyllis, Chris, Karen, Connie, Manu, Sylvia. Their families were privileged to have them as long as they could, but there's never enough time before we need to say our goodbyes. May we meet again. It was at this time that, due to health concerns, I resigned as Walk Park coordinator and from any further involvement with Scleroderma Canada. I have agreed to remain group support leader for the Central Alberta region, but right at the moment we have combined our support with 2 provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan. With no formal walk happening across Canada, we were encouraged to do fundraising online. One of the things I suggested to our 4 grandkids was to do a video, and they have always been such a huge fan club, carrying the banner on our walks, making posters, and did a great job with the video. At the close of my story, we'll watch the 30-second clip. I do want to thank my family members for their support through my scleroderma journey. Jackie and Miles Orse, Madeline and Lauren, Kent and Amanda Dyck, and Colby and Tyler. My husband Jerry, as my faithful companion chauffeur. I know too well this disease has been with me 20 years. It does not regress, but staying vigilant and catching what comes my way, I continue to battle and overcome the challenges. With God's help and the peace He alone can bring is life-changing. So we have a picture of the Sylvan Lake Lighthouse that's turned blue for our special day, June 29th, Scleroderma Day. Oh, and I see, sorry, you have my chart up first. I did a little chart that goes through the number of bangs that I've had through my lifetime, getting the CREST diagnosis, taking some methotrexate, going off of it and on of it, and then going to the Manitoba conference. I couldn't believe the support for scleroderma patients, and I wanted the same for Alberta, including Sylvan Lake. So we started the walk in the park, and I had my pulmonary vein ablation. In 2016, another walk. I started a recipe card file to help keep track of the scleroderma patients. I found food grade CBD oil, and I went to the Hamilton conference. And then there was a national conference in Halifax. And sometimes everything seems like a blur, but 2018, the conference came to Calgary. And unbeknown to some of us, the stem cell transplant medical team led by Dr. Storvik was right in Calgary, U of A. And he agreed to come to the conference. And he told a lot of people about scleroderma, as well as some of the success stories that had the ablation. And then we're into 2019. That was the first time our MP from Sylvan Lake had walked. And I walked with my leg ulcer. But with Blaine Calkins, he walked with all of us. And it was an amazing time of good therapy and good conversation. And 2020, we did get to Arizona for a couple of weeks. And the 5 weeks of COVID-19 training, it was mind-altering therapy. And so my antibiotic meds were Pipper, Sylvan, Taza, and urgent care. Again, cellulitis, pick function, that's what I'm on right now. I've learned a lot through my journey of scleroderma. Simple things: drink when you eat so you can swallow, keep warm, have a heated car steering wheel and a car seat, and use your Dr. Hole for circulation improving. So can we watch the video now, Mary Ellen? Or we want to see the, okay, let's watch the video.
This is the 2020 Scleroderma Run, and we need to find a cure, find a cure, find a cure, find a cure.
And this video has been brought to you by Scleroderma Alberta, here from Ananascus, with the announcer, Susan Dyck, and my participants. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you, Susan. And our last speaker for today is Jacob.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much to the Scleroderma Atlantic for inviting me out to speak. They asked us for a small quote or something to talk about scleroderma and kind of define it. And my quote just simply was, "Scleroderma is a chronic illness, but it's not me. Keep living life no matter what happens. Don't let anything stop you, including scleroderma." And at a young age, that's something that I had instilled in my mind from, living with a mother who has lupus. I was kind of grew up as a chronic illness caregiver already, so I kind of had a little bit of insight of what chronic illness life can be like. So at age 14, I went on a small trip to go visit some family in Carlsbad, New Mexico, one of my uncles, with my family, and I got bit by a spider. Unfortunately, a couple days later, they had to do some surgery to open up the infected tissue, and they took it out. So a couple months after that, I think that's what kind of set the onset of the scleroderma in my body. And I started having the swelling in my hands and my ankles and throughout my whole body. I was 14 years old. I was a big kid. I thought it was, just some growing pains, not a big deal. But little by little, it started to create a lot more problems in my life. I couldn't really make it to school very often. So I started having some school problems. But fortunately, my doctors, they diagnosed me with lupus because of my mom. So they try to give me as much treatment for, steroids with maybe, gain a lot of weight. I didn't have a lot of other ways to treat it. So a few years of that, we kept trying to figure out what exactly was causing the more problems and issues in my body, with my ankles and my hands starting to swell up a lot. I really did have a good rheumatologist back in New Mexico where I lived and grew up. But my family here in Houston, fortunately, kept searching and searching because they knew, and we all knew that it was more than lupus. So my sister kept searching and searching for doctors, and she found out about a very well-known scleroderma specialist here in Houston by the name of Dr. Marie Mays. Luckily, my family lives here in Houston, so I came out when I was about 17 years old, and we drove down, my family. We were all excited to get in there, so we got in, and Dr. Mays, as soon as she walked in, she looked at me and she said, "Wow, okay, you have scleroderma." After we didn't even have any blood tests, didn't have any type of test done just yet, but she already knew. So we had an answer to what was my problem when it came to my health. And as soon as we kind of learned that, it was scary to find out what was going on with my body. We understood what lupus was and what it can cause, but because we've seen it in my mom, but we didn't know what scleroderma could do. Unfortunately, it was very scary for my family. We thought, I was only going to be here maybe 5 to 10 years because that's what, Google and searching on the internet would tell you. But fortunately, I was seeing Dr. Mays, and Dr. Mays is a very well-known specialist, and she's treated me from with every, prescription and medicine that they've had out there. So we tried it out, and she's done very well. I've been happy to been treated by her. She's been great. I've actually seen her a couple of days ago. But scleroderma is about ups and downs, and that's something that I've had throughout my whole life. And at age 14, that was one of the downs. We hope to have more ups than downs, but unfortunately, with scleroderma, we had to learn how to navigate those ups and downs and keep getting back up and working harder to figure out how to get back to our healthy level and maintain. Well, at 14, that was one of the first times where I had to figure out how I was going to maintain life and get back up. And like I said, keeping that mentality of not letting scleroderma, keep you down. Unfortunately, those downs came multiple times throughout my life. At 18, I wasn't able to graduate high school because I was unable to make it to school. So I had to drop out of school and go get my GED. I didn't let scleroderma stop me. I jumped right into college as soon as I could. And fortunately, I was able to move up here to Houston and come and get my bachelor's degrees up here in Sam Houston State. I don't let scleroderma stop me. That's one thing that I try to do. Continue my life. It's not easy. You know, everybody has goals, and that's what we need to continue to strive for. You know, it's affected my relationships. It's affected my family. My family's been here to support me through thick and thin. I'm very blessed to have a mother who's taught me how to live my life and not let things let the illness get to me. Um, she's here every day for me, calling me, letting me know how I'm doing, see how I'm doing. My father also, he's been here to support me. Here most recently, you know, as you can see, I have this neck brace. I've been having some issues with my spinal cord, but I'm gonna go back to after I graduated college back in 2008. I was trying to find, you know, I graduated with a criminal justice and psychology bachelor's degree, but I wanted to become a juvenile therapist, juvenile alcohol and drug abuse therapist. But you know, you have to get into a career path and start somewhere. So I was trying to get a job from my internship at a women's battered shelter, but you know, that's when my illness was starting to affect me again. I couldn't really maintain a job too well, so they would see me and they could see the illness, and I would, you know, try to maintain it as much as possible. But my health was not really allowing me to maintain a job, and so I guess they would see that, and it would be hard for me to find a job. So that's when a lot of depression set in, and I didn't really know. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck at home. I was not wanting to do very much. At that same time, I started having some seizures, and I couldn't even drive for about a year because I think I guess the lupus was attacking my nervous system and my brain and was causing some seizures. So I wasn't able to drive. I was going through a really bad depression. But fortunately, a couple years after that, well, actually, that same time, my hands were becoming really affected. They were starting to curl in very bad, and so I had to figure out different ways to, you know, navigate through my daily routines. I had to find out new tools and ways to drive, ways to open doors, ways to, you know, but there are all kinds of tools and ways to navigate through your life with those problems. So that's something we have to find out for ourselves. It takes time, but you know, there's a lot of groups and support systems out there to help. So that's something we also can find out there on the internet. But after that, my hands caused a lot of problems. But a few years later, I mean, luckily I found I got into a relationship, and that kind of helped me kind of bounce back. Me and my ex, you know, we started a new life. I started to feel better. I was able to maintain some you know, a new life, and you know, I started to feel better. But a few years later, I started having some heart issues, and you know, luckily I had I think it was lucky. I had a really horrible bout with pneumonia, but at the same time, they found out that I had some pressure in my heart valve. So at that time, they did some tests and found that I had the pressure in my mitral and aortic valves. So they had to replace those with some mechanical valves. So luckily, it kind of saved my life having to have that traumatic pneumonia. And yeah, that was a really rough time because at that time the pneumonia almost took my life, but it almost taken my life, like I said, saved me in a way. And so they had to about a month later, after I got better from the pneumonia, I was able to have open heart surgery for them to swap those valves out with some artificial valves, mechanical valves. And since then, back in 2015, I've been having to take blood thinners. So that's that's also something that's been affecting me. And each time I have to take a new drug, I have to, see if it interacts with any of my blood thinners. So that's something that is kind of troubling. And I have to go get my blood tested every so often, make sure that my blood is at a right level. So that was another bout that I had to deal with. A few years later, after that, I was lucky to have hand surgery to help open up my hand a little bit to try to regain a little bit of function in my hand. So that helped me out some. But if I didn't have my family around me, I don't know what I would do. I'm able to have these surgeries and bounce back because I have the support of my family, those people around me to come and help me out with my daily routines. And it's not only that, ever since 2012, when I wasn't able to find a job, I knew I needed to find something to get me out there and helping people. I wanted to help people somehow, and that's when I found the Scleroderma Foundation. And I wanted to put my education and my that whole support, that whole therapy driven mentality to help others. So I got into support groups. I've been a support group leader since 2012, and it's something that I've continued to do. I've started to do advocacy, awareness, anything I can do to help get the name Scleroderma out there. Here recently, I've started a nonprofit to help patients who need financial needs or have emergency assistance. Something to help them out. It's just now getting started, but little by little, we have to find paths to help ourselves. And there's so many ways we can do that, whether it's doctors, friends helping us, standing by, family. But as a patient, we have to keep fighting. We can't let that mentality of just feeling down and out keeping us down. We have to get back up. The most recent bout I've had here was, with this neck brace I had late last year. Last year was a horrible year for a lot of people, and for myself, it was the same. I was having problems all last year with my legs. I couldn't really figure out what it was. They were just glitching, and I fell down in my kitchen, and I broke 4 of my ribs and bruised my hip pretty bad and broke my elbow, and I hit my head a little bit on my refrigerator. But at that time, I guess they really took it serious that something was going on with my legs, and they did an MRI and found out that I had some compression from some disc in the base of my neck. So they went ahead and did surgery, and they fused a couple of discs in my neck. So I will be healing from that for the next month or so, hopefully get this brace off. But these are everyday battles that the patients have to deal with when you have scleroderma, but you have to keep fighting. All of us patients have our own different battles and our own ways to deal with it, but we have to maintain a mentality and not let scleroderma get to us. But scleroderma is not me; it's just a part of me. But I do like to be a part of what can change scleroderma and change patients' lives for the better. So thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And thank you all for sharing your touching and personal stories. I guess now we'll get into our question portion of our webinar. Mary Ellen is just posting where the question and answer icon is, just to help people out a little bit there. Okay, I have a question that I see that's come in here. And I think this may go out quickly because we're at 2:59 already, so we've eaten up that hour very quickly. So I think I'll put this question out quickly to everybody because it's could be a different answer for everybody. Living with scleroderma during a pandemic is tough. How are you coping? Do you feel that you were receiving the same level of care as you did prior to the pandemic? Maybe we'll go in the same order so it's not everybody coming through. So maybe we'll start with Dina-Marie.
Okay, truth be told, no, I'm not receiving the same care prior to pandemic. I was supposed to have scheduled testing done in the summer, which it's now backlogged until March. So there's obviously the anxiety of just waiting for the testing because, you know, you freak out thinking there's something wrong internally and not knowing. Overall, though, I've been able to work from home during the pandemic, which is great being in Ottawa. So not having to go outside in the cold has been very beneficial for me health-wise. Honestly, I'm a homebody as is, and I don't go out much. So the pandemic hasn't affected me greatly, just with receiving care at my normally scheduled time.
Thank you. And Catherine?
I have not really have appointments to go to recently or since pandemic. Am I receiving the same level of care? Not really, not from the medical professions, mainly because I don't have the one-on-one with my doctors. I'm afraid to go outside to pick up prescriptions, to do the pharmacy, to go to the grocery shopping. I've now gone on to shopping with Instacart where they deliver my groceries for me. I just don't want to be outside. I'm really afraid of being outside because I've had an incident where someone walked too close to me and coughed. And that really put the scare in me. So I try my best not to be outside if I don't have to be. I'm not going anywhere. I stay in this room where I am right now. This is my craft and my peaceful room, so I stay here.
Laura?
Thank you. I have received just as good care and perhaps better care during the pandemic. I have had my tests scheduled quickly, and when I go in, the hospitals are almost empty, so I'm in and out in no time flat. I've been very lucky and thankful that the doctors that I have stayed on top of my worsening condition. In terms of overall pandemic, again, right now it's winter time and it's cold out, so I try to never go outside anyway. But Nova Scotia has been very fortunate again and very diligent. And right now I think we have 30 cases out of 1 million people. So we have so few cases. I just read where the exposure places have been and don't go there. And I'm in and out of grocery stores in 10 minutes. That's about the only place I go. So it hasn't had a negative effect on me at all.
Good. Good. Susan? Can hear
Okay.
you now.
I don't notice any difference in care. In fact, I think I'm getting more care because other people are scared spitless to go into a hospital, but I don't have much option. I have to go in, and I've been to Calgary, I've been to Red Deer, and so far I don't have COVID.
That's good. And Jacob? How about you,
Uh,
sir?
yes, I think it's been a little bit more difficult to get care down here in Houston, um, but I think it's up and down. It just depends on some parts where you're at. Luckily, I have not gotten COVID also, but I don't really go out too much. I try to stay safe as much as possible, order online here and there, or have family really help me out with that too. So, yeah.
That's good. Okay. Um, Moving on, we have a question here. Actually, it's a comment as well as a question. Thank you for your sincere and wonderful presentations. Will you or have you already received injection for COVID-19? And I guess maybe, does anybody want to put it out there to answer that one, or?
It's Catherine here. I have not received the COVID vaccine yet. I'm wondering when we will receive it though, because it's being staged right now. As we all know, it's going to the first responders first, and then to the care homes for the elderly. I'm curious as to know when people with autoimmune diseases or who are quite susceptible to getting COVID will receive theirs. So I'm waiting with bated breath, and hopefully it will be soon.
Jacob, how about you, being that you're in Houston? Are the injections a little bit different there, or are they?
They already dispersing them here and there. They are starting to have large disbursement centers throughout the city. But I myself, I spoke to Dr. Mays a couple of days ago, and she said, really, there's no rush for me to get it. So I'm kind of just playing it by ear right now.
Very good, thank you. Another question that we have, it's directed towards Jacob. Can you tell us more about Shout?
Yes, Shout is a small organization started by all patients. It's called Scleroderma Helping Others Unite Together. And we're just a small crowdfunding type a nonprofit to help applicants who are scleroderma patients with financial needs, whether they're emergency needs or something that they may need treatment wise or whatever. We're just getting started, so that's something we're hoping to get out there and get more people involved.
Very good. We have a question here from Helene, who actually she has a couple of them, so I'm just going to put them all into one here. She lives in Florida currently, and she's going to be moving back to Montreal, Quebec in about a year. She's wondering if there's any scleroderma groups in Quebec. Perhaps Laura, could you maybe direct to that question?
Sure. I see Catherine's putting her hand up, and Susan
Okay,
had said she had been part of Scleroderma Canada. I'm sure that there is a Scleroderma Quebec, but Catherine's going to answer that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. There is a scleroderma support group, and scleroderma, it's actually called Scleroderma Quebec, and they are quite large. They've got quite a few different support groups across the province of Quebec. So the individual can connect with them, and they would point her to the right, based on where she lives, they will point her to the right support group leader. But they are quite huge, and they've got a really large organization in Quebec.
And the other question that she has is there a diet recommended for scleroderma? She was advised to eliminate sugar, dairy, and gluten.
Rhonda, can I answer that?
Please.
So with the low FODMAP diet, and I had a part of my presentation, which should be part of the YouTube, it says how the bacteria or how the different sugars are broken down into different foods, and it gives you low, medium, and high FODMAP content, I think. Anyway, I follow that. Now, again, you'd have to talk to your rheumatologist or your gastro doctor about that. And I don't avoid much gluten, but I do know personally, if I eat more than one piece of bread a day, it gives me problems. If I eat many different types of sugars, I spend an inordinate amount of time on the toilet, and I do all the lactose free. The other thing that I have to be conscious of is too much whole wheat and bran. Like I have to order white toast if I'm going to eat toast, or I have to stay right away from things like bran muffins because they just give me problems for the next 2 days. So I think probably what you have to do is try to keep some sort of journal, write down what you eat, what kind of reactions you have. Of course, that's going to be a challenge because our food sits in our stomach for 3 or 4 days. So whatever's bothering you now could be something you ate 3 or 4 days ago. So it's all a guessing game, but that would be what has helped me. And the rifaximin that I was on just got me over the hump to sort of start me over again with my gut health. And then this low FODMAP diet is what's keeping me on the straight and narrow, thank goodness.
Rhonda, it's Catherine. Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. There is an individual in Quebec who is also part of the Scleroderma Quebec. She wrote a recipe book because she has scleroderma. So she said that they would be able to connect her with that book. Now, I'm not saying that book is, like that recipe book is the book, but it's helpful. And as Laura says, there are a lot of good suggestions and good recommendations in there. There's also another book that's called Meals That Heal Inflammation. It's along with the FODMAP diet. Those are, you just, as Laura says, you have to document things. You've got to keep track of what you're eating, the time you ate it, and everything that's going on in your body, because scleroderma is so unique to each individual. So you have to be your own advocate and keep a good track of what you're doing, what you're eating, and you'll end up with the right diet that suits you.
Agreed. I'm looking at the clock, and it's 3:12 now. We maybe have time for one more question, and maybe then we should, let me just go see. Actually, what we have here, it's another just a comment. Scleroderma Canada is working with Dr. Elizabeth Fullman to try and secure funding to produce a scleroderma recipe. Fingers crossed, hopefully coming out in 2021. That's interesting. That will be good to see. Perhaps we'll end our question period now. Before we do that, I just want to mention to please always, everybody, always discuss treatment alterations with your physicians prior to pursuing any healthcare management modifications on your own. You should always talk to your healthcare professionals before making any sort of changes. So thank you for attending today's session. And thank you again to our sponsors and to our speakers. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on Facebook and YouTube for further reference to it. And our next webinar is going to be scarring on the lungs and pressure in my heart, an overview of lung disease and systemic sclerosis. And it's going to be held on Sunday, February 21 at 2 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. Thank you everyone for joining us, and goodbye.